The forest seemed to close round them as Alara followed Kale through the dense undergrowth. The black thorn trees loomed like silent sentinels, their twisted branches forming jagged arches overhead. Every step felt heavy with anticipation, as though the forest itself were watching, judging, waiting. Alara's heart pounded in her chest. A mixture of fear and an unfamiliar curiosity she could not name, Kale walked ahead, steady and confident. Each movement carried authority, and yet there was a carefulness in the way he watched her from the corner of his golden eyes. He did not rush her, but he did not allow her to stray. His presence was magnetic and terrifying at the same time, like standing near a storm that could either wash you away or shelter you from harm. "You must keep close," Kale said, his voice low, carrying easily through the still forest. "The blackthorn is alive, and it does not forgive carelessness. You may think you know fear, but it is only beginning." Alara swallowed, forcing her voice steady. "I've survived worse than forests. I can survive this." Kale glanced at her, and for a moment, the golden glow in his eyes softened. "Perhaps, but survival alone is not enough. You will need strength, cunning, and trust, and trust is often the hardest to give." Alara's fingers itched to curl into fists, but she forced them to relax. Trust was not something she gave freely. She had spent her life hiding, running, avoiding danger. And yet, something in Kel's presence, something in the way he did not push her, made her feel safe in a way she had never known. The path twisted sharply, and Kale led her around an ancient oak, its bark blackened by age and time. Beneath its roots, small fires burned in the darkness, spirits, or perhaps traps left by hunters or wanderers who had come before. The forest was treacherous, alive with dangers both visible and hidden. "Alara," Kale said suddenly, stopping and turning to her. His golden eyes bore into hers, intense and unreadable. "Do you understand why I am here? Why I sought you?" Alara hesitated, her lips pressed into a thin line. "No, I do not understand. Maybe I am not meant to understand." Kale's jaw tightened slightly. "You are meant for more than understanding. You are meant to act. And the moment you stop running, the moment you face the world, the real test begins." Alara's mind raced. She had fled her home, fled the whispers of the curse, fled every expectation placed upon her. Yet here was a man, a king, telling her that her choices mattered, that her existence had a purpose far greater than survival. She did not know whether to feel fear or hope. The forest grew darker as they continued. The sunlight filtered through the thick canopy in slivers, painting the ground in stripes of gold and shadow. Birds cried in the distance, and every rustle of leaves seemed amplified in the silence between them. Alara found herself glancing at Kale, studying the way his strong frame moved through the forest, the careful precision in every step, the way his hand rested near the hilt of his sword. "Ready but not threatening. You do not fear me," he said suddenly. Breaking her thoughts, Alara's head snapped up. I do fear you, but it is not what you think." Kel's eyes narrowed, curious. "Explain." "I fear what I might feel," she admitted quietly. "I fear being drawn to someone like you, someone so strong, so commanding. I have spent my life avoiding such people. And now," she trailed off, unsure how to finish. Kale did not interrupt. Instead, he studied her in silence, the forest around them seeming to hold its breath. Then he nodded slightly, a faint acknowledgement that did not diminish his authority, but recognized her courage. "You are brave," he said simply, "and clever. That is rare." They walked in silence for a while, the only sounds the crunch of leaves underfoot and the distant howl of the wind. Alara could feel the tension between them, subtle but electric, like a current running through the air. She wanted to look away, to retreat into herself as she always had. But something made her hold her gaze, meeting his golden eyes with a mixture of defiance and curiosity. The path opened to a small clearing where the remnants of an old stone bridge stretched over a dark, slow-moving river. The bridge was broken in places, and moss covered the stones, making them slippery and treacherous. Kale stopped at the edge, his eyes scanning the river and the surrounding forest. "This is where we must cross," he said. "Careful where you step. The river is deeper than it looks, and the current is swift, Alara nodded, gripping the rough stone railing as she stepped forward. Her pulse raced with each careful step. She could feel the river below, dark and threatening, yet she pressed on, determined not to falter. Cale followed close behind, his presence a constant reminder of both danger and protection. "You are stronger than you think," he said quietly. "You have survived much already. The forest has tested you, and you have endured. That is why you are here with me." Alara glanced at him, surprised by the gentleness in his tone. He was fierce and commanding, yes, but there was also a depth to him, a quiet strength that did not demand obedience, only respect. For the first time in her life, she wondered if someone like him could truly see her not as a cursed girl to fear, but as a person with her own will, her own power. The last few steps across the bridge were the most dangerous. A stone shifted beneath her foot, and she stumbled, arms flailing. Cale was there instantly, steadying her with a firm hand on her back, his other hand brushing lightly against hers. The contact sent a shiver through her, and she realized that fear and something else, something dangerously close to longing, had tangled themselves together inside her chest. "You are safe," Cale said quietly, his golden eyes locking onto hers. "As long as you trust me, you will be safe." Alara swallowed hard, nodding, though her voice failed her. Trust. It was a word she rarely spoke, a feeling she rarely allowed herself. And yet, with him, she found herself wanting to believe. They reached the other side, the forest opening into a narrow path that wound toward Kel's fortress, hidden deep within the northern mountains. The air grew colder, the shadows longer. The forest seemed to whisper warnings of dangers still ahead, both in the wilderness and within hearts. "Alara," Cale said, breaking the silence once more, "I did not ask for blind obedience, but you must understand this. Once you leave this forest, there is no turning back. You will be part of my world, whether you wish it or not." Alara's pulse quickened. She had fled her old life to escape danger, to remain unseen, to avoid her curse. And yet, here she was, walking beside a king whose presence was as commanding as the mountains themselves, drawn into a fate she could neither escape nor fully comprehend. She wanted to ask questions, so many questions, but Kel's eyes held hers, and in them she saw patience, power, and a strange kind of understanding. The forest had led her to him, and perhaps it had been waiting for this moment all along. The path narrowed further, and the first hints of the fortress loomed in the distance, a dark silhouette against the fading light of the forest. The air seemed charged with anticipation, as though the world itself held its breath. "Alara," Cale said softly, his voice a mixture of authority and something warmer. "You are here now. You cannot turn away, and neither can I." Her heart pounded, her mind swirling with fear, curiosity, and something else she dared not name. She had survived the forest, survived the shadows, survived her own fears. But the fortress and the world beyond promised challenges unlike any she had faced before. The trees parted, revealing the first glimpse of the stone walls, dark and formidable. Guards moved silently along the ramparts, their eyes sharp, their expressions unreadable. Alara realized that she was stepping not only into a new place, but into a new life, a life that would test her courage, her heart, and her very spirit. Cale stopped at the base of the fortress steps, turning to her once more. His expression was unreadable, but his golden eyes held a spark of something intense and unspoken. "Are you ready?" he asked. Alara took a deep breath, her hand tightening on the strap of her satchel. She did not know what awaited her beyond those walls: danger, secrets, power, or perhaps something even stranger. But she knew one thing with certainty: she could not turn back now. "I am ready," she said, her voice firmer than she expected. Cale nodded once, his gaze lingering on her. Then, without another word, he led her up the steps, into the shadowed halls of his fortress, where the air was thick with history, power, and unspoken promises. The forest fell behind them, silent, watching, waiting. And inside the fortress, destiny began to weave its first threads around the cursed girl and the Alpha King who had found her. The fortress rose like a mountain of stone against the twilight sky, dark and unyielding. Its walls were carved with symbols older than memory, a silent testament to centuries of kings and warriors who had walked these halls. As Alara followed Kale through the heavy gates, she could feel the weight of history pressing around them, the air thick with secrets and unspoken rules. The hallways were lined with torches that flickered, casting shadows that danced across tapestries depicting battles and coronations long past. Alara's footsteps echoed against the cold stone floor, each step amplifying the sense of being watched. Guards passed silently, eyes alert, yet no one stopped them. It was clear that Kel's presence alone commanded absolute authority. This fortress. Alara whispered, awe and fear mingling in her voice. It's massive and old. Kale glanced at her, his golden eyes sharp but patient. Old, yes. Strong, yes. Dangerous, yes. But every stone has a purpose, every shadow a history. If you are to survive here, you must learn to read it. Alara swallowed hard. She had been prepared to hide, to flee, to survive in solitude. She had not expected to be drawn into a world so intricate, so alive, so dangerous. And yet, there was an undeniable pull in her chest, the same pull she had felt in the forest that made her want to stay, to see, to understand. Kale led her through winding corridors until they reached a large chamber filled with relics and ancient books. Candles burned in golden holders, their flames dancing over scrolls and manuscripts that smelled of time itself. The air was warm, carrying the faint scent of parchment and old wood. This is the library, Kale explained, gesturing to the shelves that climbed the walls. Knowledge, power, and memory all reside here. Few are allowed inside, and fewer still can understand it. Alara's eyes widened. She had always been curious, always hungry for understanding. Yet something about this room made her feel small. The sheer weight of history pressed upon her, and for the first time, she felt the depth of her own insignificance in the grand tapestry of the world. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked, her voice soft. Kel's gaze met hers. "Because you need to see. You are not just a girl hiding in the forest. You are part of something larger, and you will need knowledge, cunning, and courage to survive what is coming." As Alara moved closer to the shelves, her fingers brushing against the spines of ancient tomes, she felt a strange sensation of tingling that ran through her hands and up her arms. It was as though the books themselves recognized her presence, as if some unseen magic acknowledged her. "Be careful," Kale warned. "Not all knowledge is meant for the unprepared. Some truths can consume you if you are not strong." Alara nodded, feeling a shiver run down her spine. She had lived a life of fear, hiding from curses and shadows. And yet now she felt drawn to this danger, drawn to Kale, drawn to the very secrets that might destroy her. They spent hours in silence, Kale showing her passages, pointing out symbols, teaching her to read the stories hidden in the fortress walls. Slowly, Alara began to understand. She was not a mere survivor. She was a key, a figure whose existence had ripples far beyond her knowledge. But knowledge brought questions, and questions brought fear. "Alara," Kale said suddenly, his voice low and serious, "you have a curse. I have seen the way it affects others. But there is more to it than danger. There is potential, power, and if you do not learn to control it, the very thing you fear will become your undoing." Alara's heart pounded. She had spent her life believing the curse was a sentence, a shadow that would follow her forever. To hear Kale speak of it as power, something to master, was both terrifying and strangely exhilarating. "Power," she whispered, I don't know if I can." Kale's eyes softened for the briefest moment. "You must, because soon the world will demand it, and you will not have the luxury of hiding." A sudden noise startled them, a soft rustle, like a whisper in the shadows. Alara froze, and Kel's hand went instinctively to the hilt of his sword. The guards outside tensed, but nothing emerged from the darkness. "It is nothing," Kale said after a long pause, though his voice carried a caution that kept Alara alert. "But you must learn to expect the unexpected here. The fortress is old, and its walls hold secrets that have slept for centuries. Some of them are dangerous." Alara nodded, swallowing her fear. She could feel the pulse of the fortress, a living rhythm that seemed to echo her own heartbeat. The air was thick with tension, and she realized with a jolt that she was not only learning about the fortress, but also about Cale and about herself. He watched her carefully, his golden eyes tracing the subtle changes in her expression. The flicker of curiosity, the edge of fear, the moments when she almost let herself relax. There was a pull between them, silent and magnetic, growing stronger with every passing hour. Alara felt it too, though she did not dare name it. Trust was fragile, and she had little practice giving it. Night fell, and the fortress took on a new life. Shadows deepened, torches flickered more wildly, and the hall seemed to stretch into endless darkness. Cale led her to a small chamber, modest yet warm, with a window overlooking the northern mountains. The wind carried the faint scent of snow and pine, and the stars above glimmered like distant fires. "You will stay here for the night," Cale said, his voice quiet but commanding. "Tomorrow, we begin your lessons in earnest. The world outside will not wait, and neither will your destiny." Alara nodded, her heart heavy with anticipation and a nervous excitement she did not understand. The room was unfamiliar, safe yet strange, and as she moved to the window, she could see the forest stretching out below, dark and endless. A reminder of the path she had left behind, Cale's presence lingered even as he turned to leave. There was a tension in the air, a silent conversation of glances and unspoken words. She wanted to ask questions, to demand explanations, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she simply watched him go, the sound of his boots fading into the halls, alone. Alara let herself breathe, though her mind would not quiet. She had been drawn into a world of kings and curses, power and secrets, and she knew that the fortress held dangers she could not yet see. But beneath the fear, there was something else, an inexplicable pull toward Cale, a feeling that the forest had been right all along. She was not just hiding anymore. She was being watched, studied, and perhaps protected. The thought both frightened and thrilled her. A sudden knock at the door startled her. She turned quickly, but no one entered. Only the faint rustle of wind through the halls answered her. She shook her head, trying to dismiss the growing tension in her chest. But then she noticed that a small, folded piece of parchment had been slid under the door. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. On it, written in Cale's precise hand, were 3 words, "Trust me, always." Alara's pulse quickened. Trust. She had avoided it, feared it, and yet now it pressed upon her like a living thing. To trust Cale was to step into the unknown, to embrace danger, and perhaps something more. She held the note close, feeling a warmth that contrasted sharply with the cold stone of the fortress. Outside, the night deepened, and the wind carried whispers from the forest. Warnings and promises intertwined. Alara knew her life had changed. She could no longer hide, no longer flee. The forest had delivered her to Cale, and he would not let her go. And somewhere in the shadows of the fortress, Cale watched. He had felt the pull to the magnetic thread that bound them together. He did not yet understand it fully, but he knew one thing with certainty. Alara's presence had awakened something within him, something both dangerous and undeniable. As the first light of dawn crept over the mountains, Alara sat by the window, the note clutched in her hands. The forest lay silent below, but the fortress hummed with life, secrets, and power. And she realized, with a mixture of fear and anticipation, that the path ahead was no longer hers to choose alone. Cale's lessons, the secrets of the fortress, and the dangers lurking beyond the walls would test her in ways she could not imagine. Yet beneath it all, a fragile hope stirred, a hope that perhaps, in the darkness, she might find strength, purpose, and something more. The wind howled through the mountains, carrying the first hints of snow, and Alara knew that whatever lay ahead, she would face it beside the Alpha King who had found her, who had challenged her, and who had awakened a destiny she could no longer ignore. And in that moment, the forest whispered once more, as if confirming what she already suspected. She had been found, and there was no turning back. The wind whispered through the blackthorn forest, carrying with it a chill that made even the most stubborn leaves shiver. Deep within this forest, where sunlight barely touched the ground, stood an old cabin, hidden among twisted roots and dark moss. Its wooden walls were cracked, its roof sagging under the weight of years and storms. Yet it held a certain stubborn defiance against time. Inside, a single figure crouched near a dying fire, watching the shadows dance across the walls. Alara's hands shook as she stirred the last embers, trying to coax warmth from what little remained. She had been on the run for weeks, moving from one shadow to another, never staying in a place long enough to be found. Her heart still carried the weight of the past curse, whispered about in hushed tones among her family, that brought misfortune to anyone who crossed her path. She had left everything behind, fleeing not only danger, but also the knowledge that her very existence could hurt those she cared about. Outside, the forest seemed alive. Branches swayed though no wind had yet reached them, and the distant cry of a bird sharp, urgent made her flinch. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, set her nerves on edge. She was alone, or so she believed, but someone or something was coming. Alara could feel it before she saw it. The weight of eyes on her back, the subtle vibration in the air, the sense of power and authority that seemed to push the shadows aside. She rose slowly, keeping her hands visible, though she knew it would not save her if this intruder intended harm. From between the dense trees, he emerged, tall, broad, with a presence that made the forest itself seem to bow. His hair was dark as midnight, falling in loose waves around his strong face, and his eyes, sharp and golden, scanned the cabin with careful intent. Every step he took made the ground tremble slightly, though the sound of his boots was almost imperceptible over the whispering leaves. He carried himself like a king, a predator who had long ago learned that few dared to defy him. Kale, the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, had been searching the forest for days. Rumors had reached his ears of a lone figure hiding among the shadows, someone marked by ancient magic, someone he was meant to find. Few dared speak his name lightly, and fewer still had seen his face and lived to tell the tale. Yet here he was, drawn by a force he could not name, yet could not ignore. Alara froze as the first rays of recognition or perhaps fear flashed across her mind. She had heard stories of the Alpha King, ruthless, merciless, yet strangely magnetic. People said he could command loyalty with a glance and crush rebellion with a word. She had no choice but to hide, but she knew the forest had already betrayed her presence. Kale stopped a few paces from the cabin. He did not raise a weapon, nor did he speak. Instead, he simply watched, as if the world had narrowed to the cabin and the lone woman inside. "You've been hiding for a long time," he said finally, his voice low and controlled, like a river running over stones. "Do you think the forest can protect you from me?" Alara swallowed hard, finding her voice barely a whisper. I only want to be left alone." Kale tilted his head slightly, a small smile playing at the corner of his lips. "Alone, perhaps. Or perhaps you have been running from more than just the world. You carry something even the forest fears." Her heart skipped a beat. How could he know? The curse had always been a secret, known only to her family and a few who had sought to use it. She looked at him, eyes wide, trying to read the expression in his golden gaze. He did not strike. He did not even move closer. Instead, he seemed curious, studying her as though she were a puzzle meant to be solved. Alara's fear battled with a strange sense of fascination. She had spent so long in solitude, avoiding all contact. And yet here was someone who did not flinch at her presence. He did not recoil. He did not threaten. And somehow, that made him more terrifying than any attacker she had ever imagined. "Why are you here?" she asked, trying to sound braver than she felt. "Why would the Alpha King of all people come into this cursed forest for me?" Kale's eyes darkened, but there was a flicker of something else, recognition, perhaps, or a memory buried deep within him. "Because," he said slowly, "I have been searching for you, though I do not yet understand why." Her hands shook, and she took a small step back. The cabin felt suddenly smaller, as if the walls themselves were closing in. "You don't understand. If you touch me, you'll be harmed," he finished for her, his voice calm but edged with something sharp, something like warning. "I am aware of the stories, Alara, and yet here I stand. Are you frightened of me, or of yourself? Her breath caught. The Alpha King's presence was overwhelming, yet there was a strange comfort in it, a sense of inevitability that chilled and intrigued her all at once. She did not know why, but she felt the forest lean toward him, the shadows parting as if even the trees recognized his authority. I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I need to survive. Cale studied her for a long moment, his gaze penetrating, weighing, deciding. Then, as if the decision had been made centuries ago, he stepped forward, the forest seeming to bow beneath his movement. He did not raise a weapon, nor did he reach for her. Instead, he simply observed, like a storm waiting to break. You will not survive here alone for much longer, he said finally. The forest is not kind to those its senses are important. Come with me. I will keep you alive. But you must trust me, even if you fear me. Alara's mind raced. She had spent her life avoiding kings, avoiding power, avoiding anyone who might claim her for their own. Yet here was the Alpha King, the very embodiment of danger and authority, offering protection. Against all reason, against all instinct. Something inside her whispered that this was her only chance. I cannot, she said, shaking her head. I am cursed. You cannot be near me. Cale's gaze softened just slightly, though the intensity remained. Cursed, he echoed. Perhaps, or perhaps the world has simply misunderstood your power. But I am not afraid. You must decide, trust me, or remain alone in the forest. Your choice will shape what comes next. The fire sputtered, sending sparks up toward the ceiling. Shadows danced across the walls as Alara weighed her options. Stay and face the unknown dangers alone, or follow this Alpha King into a world she did not understand, trusting someone she barely knew. And then, before she could answer, a sudden noise shattered the tense quiet. A branch snapped outside, closer this time, and the forest seemed to exhale around them. Alara's heart leapt into her throat. Kel's eyes narrowed, golden and fierce. They are coming, he said simply, but you will not face them alone. Alara's fear surged, but a strange warmth bloomed in her chest. Despite the danger, despite the uncertainty, she sensed that for the first time in her life, she was not entirely alone. Cale stepped closer to the cabin door, hand resting on the hilt of a sword that gleamed even in the dim light. The forest around them grew still, as if holding its breath. Alara followed him reluctantly, curiosity and fear twisting inside her. The Alpha King moved with a quiet confidence, every motion precise, every step deliberate. He was a force of nature, commanding the shadows and the wind. Yet there was something human in the way his eyes lingered on her, something unspoken that made her pulse quicken. You should know, he said quietly, that once the forest has marked you, there is no returning to your old life. You are part of something larger now. Whether you accept it or not, Alara swallowed hard, her throat dry. She wanted to speak, to ask questions, to demand explanations, but the forest had already answered for her. It had revealed her secret, drawn the Alpha King to her, and set events in motion that could not be undone. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. Somewhere in the darkness, a predator watched. And yet, inside the cabin, two figures, one hunted. 100 stood together, bound by the invisible threads of destiny. Alara looked up at Cale, her eyes wide, filled with fear and something else she did not yet understand. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable, a mixture of curiosity, authority, and a strange, growing respect. You have a choice, he said once more, his voice steady. But the forest will not wait forever. Decide quickly. And with that, the shadows in the cabin seemed to thicken, as though the forest itself had leaned in to watch. Alara's hand trembled as she reached for the door. Her heart raced. Her life was about to change, and she knew, deep down, that there was no turning back. The Alpha King's golden eyes met hers one last time before the cabin door creaked open, and the darkness of the forest spilled inside. She stepped forward, and the world shifted. The morning light filtered through the fortress windows, casting long streaks of gold across the stone floors. Alara rose from her small bed in the chamber Cale had given her. the note he had left still clutched in her hand. The words, "Trust me, always," lingered like a heartbeat in her chest. They were simple, yet their weight pressed upon her, reminding her that the forest had delivered her into a world she could no longer escape. She moved quietly through the hallways, careful to avoid guards and servants, drawn instead to the library where Cale had spent so much of the night. The fortress felt alive now, almost breathing, with shadows that moved in the corners of her vision. Each step made her acutely aware of Cale's presence even when he was not near. It felt as if his golden gaze followed her. Warm and sharp all at once, Cale found her near the shelves, examining a book bound in dark leather. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he watched her as she traced her fingers along the edges of the pages, the faint glow of magic brushing against her fingertips. "You are curious," he said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, steady, yet carried a weight that made her shiver. Alara looked up, startled. "I need to understand. Everything here, everything about this fortress, about you, about my curse. I need to understand it." Cale's gaze softened, just slightly, and he stepped closer. "Curiosity is a strength, not a weakness. But be careful, Alara. Some truths are dangerous. Some knowledge can change you forever." Her heart pounded, a mixture of fear and fascination. She had survived the forest, survived the whispers of the curse, but this was different. Here, in the fortress, she was confronting not only power and secrets, but her own feelings she could barely name. She was drawn to Cale, both afraid of him and compelled by him, and the tension between them was almost tangible. "Cale," she whispered, her voice trembling, "why do you care about me? Why did you find me? I am cursed. I am dangerous." Cale's eyes darkened, but there was no anger in them, only intensity. "You are dangerous, yes, but danger does not mean undeserving. You have a strength I have not seen in anyone else, and I could not let you face the world alone." Alara's throat tightened. The Alpha King, feared by all, the ruler whose name brought obedience and terror, had shown her a kindness she had never known. And yet, it was not kindness alone. There was a magnetic force in his presence, a connection she could not explain. The day passed slowly, filled with lessons and exploration. Cale guided her through secret passages, showed her hidden chambers, and spoke of the history of the fortress, of kings long dead and battles long forgotten. Each story, each relic, seemed to pull her deeper into a world of power, danger, and destiny. Yet beneath it all, a storm was brewing. Whispers had reached Cale of a faction within the kingdom that sought to use Alara's curse to challenge his rule. They were cunning, patient, and cruel, willing to manipulate anyone to achieve their goals. Cale did not tell Alara immediately. He wanted her focus to remain sharp, her courage intact. But he felt the weight of the threat pressing against the walls of the fortress, and he knew that the time would come when she would have to face it. As night fell, the fortress transformed. Shadows deepened, and the air grew colder, carrying the faint scent of distant snow and distant fires. Alara and Cale moved to a balcony overlooking the northern mountains. The wind whipped around them, tugging at her hair, yet she did not step back. "You must understand," Cale said quietly, his eyes fixed on the horizon, "that the curse you carry is not merely a threat. It is also a key to forces far older than either of us. And those who wish to exploit it will not hesitate to harm you or me." Alara shivered, not from the cold, but from the weight of his words. "I have always feared my curse," she admitted, her voice barely audible over the wind. "I thought it was a punishment, a shadow I could never escape. And now, I am part of something I do not understand." Cale turned to her, his expression intense. Yet something softer lingered beneath the surface. "Fear is natural, but you are stronger than you realize, and you will not face it alone. Not while I am here." Their eyes met, and for a long moment, silence stretched between them. There was an unspoken tension, a pull that neither dared to name. Alara felt it, a mixture of fear, curiosity, and longing. She had spent her life running, hiding, avoiding connection. Yet here, beside the Alpha King, She felt the stirrings of something she could not resist. Suddenly, a noise shattered the fragile calm sound from the hall below, a shadow moving in the corridors. Kel's hand went immediately to his sword, his body tense, ready. Alara instinctively stepped back, her heart racing, but Kel did not move away from her. Instead, he placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Stay close," he whispered. "Do not move unless I tell you." "This is not a threat, but a test of vigilance." Alara nodded, trying to steady her breathing. The fortress seemed alive, its shadows shifting and twisting as if aware of the danger approaching. Cale moved silently down the stairs, every motion precise, his senses attuned to the slightest movement. Alara followed, tense but trusting, her trust fragile yet growing stronger with every step. They reached the main hall, where the guards had gathered, alert and ready. Kel's gaze swept over them, assessing, commanding. Then he spoke, his voice carrying authority that demanded attention. "We have company. Remain vigilant. Do not engage unless I give the signal." Alara watched, her pulse quickening. As Cale moved through the hall, the weight of leadership evident in every step, she realized, with a mixture of awe and fear, that this man, this Alpha King, was not merely powerful. He was relentless, commanding, and unyielding, yet he had chosen to protect her. As the night deepened, the source of the disturbance became clear. A faction loyal to rival lords had infiltrated the fortress, seeking to exploit the ancient curse. Shadows moved along the walls, silent and deadly, but Cale was ready. He moved with the precision of a predator, neutralizing the threat with skill and efficiency that left Alara breathless. When the danger was finally subdued, Cale returned to the balcony where Alara waited, his expression unreadable, but his golden eyes softening as they met hers. "You see," he said quietly, "the world outside the forest is far more dangerous than you imagined. But danger is also opportunity, and you have a part to play." Alara nodded, her mind swirling. She had faced fear before, but never like this, not with her life intertwined with another's, not with the weight of destiny pressing upon her. And yet, beneath the fear, there was a spark of something else, a connection, a bond, a sense that she was no longer alone in the world. Cale stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet strangely comforting. "Alara," he said, his voice low, "you do not need to face this alone. Not now, not ever. But you must trust me completely. Only then can we survive what is coming." Alara swallowed hard, the wind tugging at her hair, the stars above witnessing the unspoken tension between them. She wanted to speak, to ask questions, to demand explanations, but words failed her. Instead, she nodded, the gesture simple yet profound, her trust. She had feared it, avoided it, and yet here it was the only way forward. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps, with Cale, she could face anything. A sudden shadow crossed the balcony, and Alara's heart leapt. Cale's eyes narrowed, and he moved instantly, placing himself between her and the unknown. But there was nothing, only the wind, carrying the faint whisper of the forest, the promise of storms yet to come. "You are ready," Cale said finally, his voice carrying both command and reassurance. "But the real test is not yet over. The curse you carry, the threats that follow, the choices you will face, they will challenge you in ways you cannot imagine." Alara looked at him, her pulse quickening. She had survived the forest, the shadows, and the night's dangers. But now she understood that the true challenge had only just begun, and it would not be faced alone, not while Cale stood beside her. The Alpha King who had found her, who had challenged her, and who had awakened feelings she dared not yet name. The wind howled again, carrying the scent of snow and the promise of trials ahead. Alara clutched the note Cale had given her, the words "trust me," always echoing in her mind. And as the first snowflakes began to fall, delicate and cold, she realized that the fortress, the forest, and the Alpha King had become part of her fate, and fate, as she now understood, was not something to be avoided, it was something to be faced. The fortress stood silent beneath a sky heavy with storm clouds, the northern mountains shrouded in snow and shadow. Alara stood at the balcony, watching the winds whip around the towers. Her heart was heavy with anticipation, but also strangely steady. The past days had been a journey through fear, secrets, and discovery. Now, the real test awaited the confrontation with the forces that sought to exploit her curse in the destiny that had entwined her with Kale. Kale joined her silently, his presence a calm yet overwhelming force. The golden glow of his eyes contrasted with the darkening sky, and he placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "It begins tonight," he said, his voice low but certain. "The ones who follow the shadows will come, and you must be ready not only to survive, but to stand." Alara nodded. Fear and determination battled inside her. She had fled from danger all her life, hiding from the whispers of her curse. But now, she understood something crucial. She was not merely a girl with a curse. She was a key, a force that could shape the future. And Kale was the one who had chosen to stand beside her. Together, they moved through the fortress corridors, past the guards, and into the central hall of vast chamber where the history of kings and warriors echoed in the stone walls. The air hummed with tension, charged with magic and anticipation. Every shadow seemed alive, and Alara felt the weight of eyes upon her watching. Waiting, testing. Suddenly, the doors to the hall burst open, and figures cloaked in darkness entered, moving with deadly precision. Their intent was clear, to seize Alara and exploit her curse for their gain. Kale stepped forward, his sword gleaming in the torchlight, his presence commanding every inch of the hall. "Do not touch her," he said, his voice carrying authority that made even the intruders pause. "You will not succeed." Alara's pulse raced, but she did not step back. The lessons Kale had given her, the knowledge she had absorbed, and the strength she had discovered within herself coalesced into a courage she had never known. She stood beside him, her gaze fierce, her body ready. The battle began swiftly. Shadows lunged from the corners, weapons flashing, yet Kale moved like a force of nature. Every strike precise, every motion calculated. Alara followed, using the lessons he had taught her, the ways to manipulate the environment, to use her awareness of the curse's power without letting it consume her. She felt it within her now, a controlled surge of energy that responded to her will. The curse was no longer merely a threat, it was a tool, a part of her. As a shadow approached, she extended her hand, and a wave of energy pushed it back, sending the intruder sprawling. The others hesitated, realizing the girl they had underestimated was far more formidable than they had imagined. Kale glanced at her, a flicker of pride in his eyes. "Well done," he said, and she felt warmth at the praise, a connection that went beyond words. But the battle was far from over. The leader of the intruders stepped forward, a tall figure cloaked in black, eyes glinting with malice. He raised his hand, summoning dark energy that crackled through the hall. "You think you can stand against me, girl?" The figure sneered. "Your curse is mine to command." Alara's heart pounded, but she did not falter. She felt Kale at her side, steady and strong, and it gave her the courage to face the darkness directly. "You are wrong," she said, her voice firm. "My curse is mine, and I will not be your pawn." The dark figure laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the hall. "Very well, then perish." The clash began. Kale and Alara moved in tandem, a synchronized force of power and skill. She channeled the energy of her curse, focusing it into precise bursts, striking the intruders with controlled power. Kale's sword moved like lightning, cutting through shadows, shielding her whenever she wavered. For a moment, the world seemed suspended, the clash of light and dark, the hiss of energy, the flaring torches casting moving shadows that danced like spirits. Alara felt every emotion in heightened clarity: fear, determination, exhilaration, and an unexpected surge of longing for Kale, who fought beside her with unmatched strength and unwavering resolve. The leader of the intruders advanced, but Kale intercepted him with a powerful strike. The dark figure stumbled but rose again, his energy crackling. Alara took a deep breath, feeling the power of the curse rise within her. She extended her hands, focusing every ounce of her will. A brilliant light surged forward, engulfing the intruder, and he let out a final scream before collapsing into the shadows. Silence fell. The hall was littered with the defeated, their dark presence dissipating like smoke in the wind. Kale lowered his sword, his golden eyes meeting Alara's. She was breathless, exhilarated, and terrified all at once. "You did it," Cale said softly, his voice carrying both awe and reassurance. "You controlled it. You controlled yourself." Alara's legs shook, and she sank to the floor, leaning against him. For the first time in her life, she felt a deep, unshakable sense of triumph. She had faced the curse, the darkness, and her fears and emerged stronger. Cale knelt beside her, his hand brushing hers, the connection undeniable. "You are more than I imagined," he said quietly. "And yet, there's something more. Something neither of us has admitted." Alara looked up, her heart pounding. "What do you mean?" He reached out, lifting her chin gently, forcing her to meet his gaze. "This bond between us. It is more than fate. It is her choice, and I choose to stand by you, always." The words struck her like fire. The Alpha King, powerful and commanding, had chosen her not as a pawn, not as a curiosity, but as someone he would protect, fight beside, and trust. Her chest tightened with emotion she had long denied, relief, hope, and a budding, undeniable affection. I trust you," she whispered, her voice trembling, yet full of conviction. "Always." Cale's expression softened, and for the first time, the walls around his heart seemed to lower. He extended his hand, and Alara took it, feeling warmth and strength flow between them. Outside, the snow began to fall gently, coating the fortress in a blanket of white. The wind carried the faint scent of the forest, of life, of beginnings. Alara realized that she was no longer the girl hiding in the woods, no longer the girl defined by fear and a curse. She had embraced her power, her destiny, and the connection with Cale. The storm outside mirrored the storm within her, yet she felt calm for the first time. The trials had shaped her, the danger had sharpened her, and the bond with Cale had awakened something deeper. Then either had expected a connection that transcended fear, power, and fate. Cale led her to the balcony once more, the fortress silent around them. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he held her hand, their fingers intertwined, the warmth of human touch grounding them both amidst the cold winds and snow. Together, he said finally, his voice low, yet carrying certainty, "We face whatever comes next. No darkness, no curse, no enemy can separate us. Do you understand?" Alara nodded, a quiet smile forming on her lips. "I understand." Together, the night sky opened above them, stars glimmering through breaks in the storm clouds. The fortress, ancient and formidable, seemed to sigh in relief, as if acknowledging the union of two forces destined to meet. The wind carried whispers of the forest, the mountains, and the world beyond. Yet Alara felt a deep, unshakable peace. She looked at Cale, and in his golden eyes, she saw a reflection of her own journey, fear, struggle, courage, and the spark of love that had been growing quietly, steadily, through every trial. "I never imagined," she said softly, "that hiding in the forest would lead me here." To this, Cale smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Destiny has its ways, and sometimes it is more generous than we dared to hope." As snowflakes drifted around them, the fortress quiet, the danger gone for now, Alara and Cale stood together, bound not only by fate but by choice. The curse had not defined her, it had empowered her. The trials had not broken her, they had strengthened her. And the bond they shared was not a fleeting spark, it was a flame that would endure, lighting their path through darkness and uncertainty. For the first time, Alara felt whole, not hidden, not alone, not afraid. And beside her, Cale, the Alpha King, held her hand firmly, his presence a promise, a shield, and a companion through whatever destiny awaited. The forest whispered its approval, the mountains echoed their triumph, and the fortress, ancient and watchful, seemed to hum with quiet approval. Together, they had faced darkness, embraced power, and chosen one another, and in that choice, a new story began, a story of courage, trust, and a love forged in shadow and fire. Unyielding against the storms of the world, Alara finally understood. She had been found. She had chosen. And together, they would face everything that came next. The snow fell, gentle and endless, covering the fortress in a pristine silence. Inside, two hearts beat in unison, bound by destiny, courage, and the enduring spark of love. The world beyond could wait. They had each other.